Sphere. The Humanitarian Charter and Minimum Standards. Part 1. What are the Sphere Standards? The Sphere Standards are a set of principles and minimum humanitarian standards aiming to improve the quality and accountability of the humanitarian sector in 4 technical areas of humanitarian response: water supply, sanitation and hygiene promotion, food security and nutrition, shelter and settlement, health. The Sphere Handbook. The Sphere Handbook offers an integrated approach to humanitarian work incorporating humanitarian principles, the Core Humanitarian Standard and technical standards, in 2 main categories. First, foundation chapters. Second, technical chapters. Foundation chapters, including Humanitarian Charter, Core Humanitarian Standards, and Protection Principles. The Humanitarian Charter. 1. Our beliefs. Humanitarian principles are universal, applying to all those affected by disaster or conflict, and reflected in international law, and believe that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. As local, national, and international humanitarian agencies committed to promoting and adhering to these principles, all those who engage in humanitarian activities, including governmental and private sector actors, are invited to endorse the common principles, rights, and duties set out below as a statement of shared humanitarian belief. 2. Our role. We acknowledge that it is firstly through their own efforts, and through the support of community and local institutions, that the basic needs of people affected by disaster or conflict are met. Where national capacity is insufficient, we affirm the role of the wider international community, including governmental donors and regional organizations, in assisting states to fulfill their responsibilities. We recognize and support the special roles played by the mandated agencies of the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross. As humanitarian agencies, we interpret our role in relation to the needs and capacities of affected populations and the responsibilities of their governments or controlling powers. 3. Common principles, rights, and duties. We offer our services as humanitarian agencies on the basis of the principle of humanity and the humanitarian imperative, recognizing the rights of all people affected by disaster or conflict, women and men, boys and girls. These include the rights to protection and assistance reflected in the provisions of international humanitarian law, human rights, and refugee law. For the purposes of this charter, we summarize these rights as follows: the right to life with dignity, the right to receive humanitarian assistance, and the right to protection and security. For our commitment, we offer our services in the belief that the affected population is at the center of humanitarian action, and recognize that their active participation is essential to providing assistance in ways that best meet their needs, including those of vulnerable and socially excluded people. By adhering to the Core Humanitarian Standard and the minimum standards, we commit to making every effort to ensure that people affected by disasters or conflict have access to at least the minimum requirements for life with dignity and security, including adequate water, sanitation, food, nutrition, shelter, and health care. Protection Principles. 4 protection principles apply to all humanitarian action and all humanitarian actors. 1. Enhance the safety, dignity, and rights of people, and avoid exposing them to harm. 2. Ensure people's access to assistance according to need and without discrimination. 3. Assist people to recover from the physical and psychological effects of threatened or actual violence, coercion, or deliberate deprivation. 4. Help people claim their rights. Core Humanitarian Standard. The Core Humanitarian Standard on Quality and Accountability, CHS, sets out 9 commitments that organizations and individuals involved in humanitarian response can use to improve the quality and effectiveness of the assistance they provide. Knowing what humanitarian organizations have committed to will enable them to hold those organizations to account. Commitment 1. Communities and people affected by crisis receive assistance appropriate to their needs. Commitment 2. Communities and people affected by crisis have access to the humanitarian assistance they need at the right time. Commitment 3. Communities and people affected by crisis are not negatively affected and are more prepared, resilient, and less at risk as a result of humanitarian action. Commitment 4. Communities and people affected by crisis know their rights and entitlements, have access to information and participate in decisions that affect them. Commitment 5. Communities and people affected by crisis have access to safe and responsive mechanisms to handle complaints. Commitment 6. Communities and people affected by crisis receive coordinated, complementary assistance. Commitment 7. Communities and people affected by crisis can expect delivery of improved assistance as organizations learn from experience and reflection. Commitment 8. Communities and people affected by crisis receive the assistance they require from competent and well-managed staff and volunteers. Commitment 9. Communities and people affected by crisis can expect that the organizations assisting them are managing resources effectively, efficiently, and ethically. In Part 2 we will talk about the technical chapters including wash, food, shelter, and health as follows. For more information you can visit our website.